Hello there, you Awakening Wonders. Thanks for joining me today for Stay Free with Russell Brand. Whether you're watching this right now on YouTube or you're a member of our Locals Awakened Wonder community or our home of Rumble, you are going to love today's show and we want your involvement. It's absolutely integral that independent media remains the voice of the people, a conduit for your inquiry, your questions, your awakening, so that we can truly build unified but decentralized models together. It's become plain to me, it's become plain to the world that independent media is now by its nature political. Gone are the days when it's just about reporting. It is now about movement and activism. And I know there's a lot of division in the world. It's in this time of omni-crisis, doesn't it seem that division and fracture and fissure is what defines us? Well, who's going to unify us? Is it the centralized powers of the globalist establishment? By that I mean institutions that are transcendent of democracy, that are able to impose regulation and legislation on your nation, i.e. the WHO, with their ability to command 5% of the health budget of any member nation. Grab that dog, someone, give him a treat. Bear my dog plainly, strongly, WHO. Against, I would say, strongly against. We've got so many incredible things to talk to you about and we need your involvement. I'm going to be asking you a variety of questions that you'll simply respond to with yes or no, or maybe even Y or N or 1 or 2. In Here's the News, we're going to be talking about a recent story. Let me know if you've seen this. A meme prankster was jailed for 7 months for offering voters the opportunity, and who would not want this opportunity, to vote for Hillary Clinton by text. It's a story from 2016, but the dude's just been jailed. We're going to be talking about that and what contributes to anti-democratic practices more strongly. Is it online humorists? Or is it establishment-affiliated stooge politicians that represent corporatism and work entirely for the donor class and don't care about you, the electorate, that want you disempowered and misinformed, that even talk about deprogramming, did you see that? Let me know if you saw it. That interview where Hillary Clinton said that Trump voters need to be debugged. We'll be looking at that. Also, on the subject of decentralization, and it's a word I'm going to be using a lot, we talked to Will Harris. Do you know who Will Harris is? He's that farmer. He's that beef farmer who came from an industrial beef background and went all organic. This guy is unbelievable. He's funny. He's been on the show a bunch of times. And even though I don't eat meat myself, I know a lot of you do, you carnivorous brutes. You know, we have guests on here like Paul Saladino saying you can't be healthy unless you bite a chunk out of any passing elk. I know, like you lot out there in the US estates, you like to be shooting things out of trees and bushes and any environment really. But me, I don't do that. And yet I love you still. For we can love one another in spite of our diets. Now, for the first 15 minutes, we're going to be on YouTube, and we love every one of you Awaken Wonders, but there's a link in the description, and that link is a pathway to a promised land. For surely a spiritual war is upon us, and if you want to be on the side of the righteous, you've got to be on the side of the free, a place where you can oppose the opinions of others safely and respectfully. Join us. If you're not on Rumble yet, join us on Rumble now. You might have to later because some of the subjects we're discussing might involve things that fall within the tenure of the WHO regulation that YouTube, as you know, uses for its community guidelines. That's how centralization and globalism works. That's the soft end of it entering into your life. We've got some brilliant content, but I want to get into the main story, of course. Did you lot see Joe Biden's speech the other night in a curiously, I would say, rambling and ineloquent piece of oratory from that great epitomizing symbol of democracy, that synecdoche of power, the White House? Biden seemed to be talking about bundling together financial aid for a variety of complex wars, including the conflict in the Middle East, Ukraine and Russia, and even a potential conflict between the US and China. Did you see this? Did you see it? And let me know, I'm fascinated to know this. Did you see it as an opportunity to conflate a new and emergent conflict where tensions are very high and people are understandably in a very emotional space given the nature of the tragedy unfolding, with the increasingly less popular Ukraine-Russia conflict? And not unpopular, I would offer you, because people don't support the people of Ukraine, but because people are seeing that the conditions of that war are not as initially described. And indeed, even in this speech, it becomes clear that Biden, watch it, you might even miss this if you don't watch very carefully, subtly starts talking about boots on the ground. And if you want to know how this speech is going to roll out, you have to look at the commencement of it. Before that, we've got a comment here from Andy Free One, a member of our Awakened Wonder community. If you're watching us on Rumble right now, press the red button, become an Awakened Wonder. You get access to all sorts of additional content based on solutions. How are we going to get out of the Omni crisis? How are we going to unite? How are we going to change the world together? How are we going to mobilize the deep spiritual power that I know you have to overcome what seems like omnipresent enmity, what seems like an unassailable opponent? Andy Free on that platform, on Locals, one of our Awakened Wonders asks, so, listening to the radio news on the way to work, and they moved from one news item about the humanitarian relief needing to be sent into Gaza. Then they moved to Biden talking about monetary support for Israel and Ukraine. What's going on? Well, this idea of bundling together financial aid for numerous distinct conflicts is the subject of the question I want to ask you. So let me know in the chat if you're watching us live, particularly on Rumble now. So I'm talking to you, Wagner195. I'm talking to you, Free Assange for Truth. I'm talking to you, a big fan, warrior of God for life. God help you. I'm talking about this. Do you think that these conflicts should be bundled together or looked at as discrete conflicts, potentially with discrete solutions that would require a variety of different potential means? So if you think they should be bundled together, can you just put Y in the chat for me now? And if you think they should be looked at distinctly, just type N. Now let's get looking at that speech from Biden right now. Look at how it starts as well. Let me show you that. Am I supposed to be bundling together some complex ideas right now? Fellow Americans. Like that bit when he's looking around not saying anything, that's the real Joe Biden, isn't it? That's what we're seeing, a sort of hollow conduit for invisible ulterior power that does not alter regardless of who you vote for. Let me know if that's true.
Good evening.
Let's check out the rest of the speech and pay attention to what's the agenda here. Is this about supporting people in a time of crisis, or is this about exploiting a time of crisis? I want you to decide for yourselves and determine for ourselves because, you know.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. We're facing an inflection point in history.
Here's the inflection.
One of those moments where the decisions we make today are going to determine the future for decades to come.
If there's such a thing as decades to come.
I know these conflicts can seem far away.
Well, really, there's like one everywhere. There's some talk of the aid that's being bundled together in, I think, $100 billion package. Is it as much as that? Some of it being used on the border, being used for potential conflict with China. So no matter where you go on vacation, there's going to be a world war for you.
And it's natural to ask, why does this matter to America? For 75 years, NATO has kept peace in Europe.
Well, I don't know, the last couple of months, you could question their activity. For example, NATO themselves admitted that Putin said, listen, if you continue to ask Ukraine to join, there will be problem. If you try to annex Crimea, and yet NATO went, well, we're not doing that. That's not how we work at NATO. We're pretty tough bureaucrats over here. So, yeah, they might have done some peacekeeping. Let me know in the chat if you think that's what the function of NATO is. And do we even need a NATO anymore? Who benefits? Who benefits? Or do you think that NATO has played a part in the escalation of this conflict?
And has been the cornerstone of American security. And if Putin attacks a NATO ally, we will defend every inch of NATO which the treaty requires and calls for. We'll have something that we do not seek. Make it clear, we do not seek. We do not seek to have American troops fighting in Russia.
Why are you talking about that? Why saying you don't seek it? We don't seek it, but it might inevitably oh no, look what's happened. There's troops all over that war. It's very interesting. Do you think that this speech from Joe Biden, let me know, is this an example of priming where you're offered ideas and slowly maneuvered in the direction of an agenda? And let me know this, do you think it's the function of the legacy media to amplify the intentions of the powerful and to normalize the intentions of the powerful. So suddenly, something that's pretty wacky, like robots stealing everybody's jobs, seems like a great idea on a news item, and we're going to be giving you the opportunity to see that a little later. You're going to love that story, even if it feels somewhat terrifying and dystopian. So let's go back to Joe Biden and his rambling attempt to make very complex and difficult situations seem like an opportunity that Raytheon just can't afford to miss.
Are fighting against Russia. That's why tomorrow I'm going to send to Congress an urgent budget request to fund America's national security needs, to support our critical partners, including Israel and Ukraine. Is a smart investment that's going to...
Investment? Why are we talking about the language of finance and economics? Whose interests are being met here? Is this humanitarian support for allies across the world, or is it an opportunity to exploit conflict? And before you answer, have a look at a little thing called all history, and in particular, the history of recent American wars.
Pay dividends for American security for generations. Help us keep American troops out of harm's way.
One way to do that is stop escalating the conflict between Ukraine and Russia.
Help us build a world that is safer, more peaceful, more...
Did he say build a world, or did he say build a wall? I thought we were against war. No, more walls. Thing about Trump, he didn't like walls. He didn't build enough of them, and he didn't build them right. I mean, the policies change so quickly, it's difficult to keep up, even if he does speak pretty slowly.
Prosperous for our children and grandchildren.
Children and grandchildren might be an issue if we induce Armageddon by engaging global superpowers in needless conflict in order to establish a unipolar hegemony that doesn't benefit the ordinary Americans, who are some of the most decent people on God's earth, but seems to benefit elite establishment interests transcendent of nation. I'm speaking specifically of corporate interests and unelected bodies. Just one example being the WHO. I'm not suggesting they're behind this war. Certainly not. Certainly not. I'm just saying that those kind of agencies appear to have undue power. Let me know what you think in the chat, you guys in Rumble. And remember, I'm still watching for whether or not you think that this is about bundling together complex and distinct conflicts, or is this about humanitarian aid and the unique role of the United States of America as your president, I'm sorry to say that to you, your president claims.
Patriot missiles for air defense batteries.
The lip touch, never a good sign.
Made in Arizona. You know, just as in World War II.
Not like that this is a job opportunity for people in Arizona, is it? Is that what you think this is? Do you know what we have to do? Go to war with China, go to war with Russia. Over in Arizona, jobs making missiles. Also, we're going to be testing some of those missiles in Arizona as well, so shut your windows. Also, we'll be talking about some of the jobs that are being replaced right now as automation continues at pace.
Today, patriotic American workers are building the arsenal of democracy.
I don't like the phrase arsenal of democracy. We talk a lot, don't we, about Orwellian doublespeak. But when you hear a phrase like arsenal of democracy, what the hell is this nuclear arsenal? That is democracy, because without it, you're just not going to be free enough. And if you want to question that, I'm going to have to explode you.
And serving the cause of freedom. In moments like these, we have to remember who we are. We're the United States of America.
That is reductivism. He does it again, though. Watch.
The United States of America. And there is nothing.
Do you remember the universal condemnation of Donald Trump for the crime of jingoism, patriotism, reductivism, make America great again? Oh, if only it were that simple. What's dog whistled within that? The problem is that Biden is trying to do what Trump does so well, but badly. We're the United States of America. What's that supposed to mean? And therefore, the escalating tensions with China won't lead to a conflict that will ultimately cost unnecessary lives? That sustaining and what seems like an unwinnable war with Russia won't cost many, many lives, American and otherwise, introducing, notice for the first time, the concept of American boots on the ground. In a sense, I sometimes think that the problem they really have with Trump is Trump's just better at communicating than they are.
Nothing beyond our capacity if we do it together.
There you go. Nothing. At the end, it's sort of like Live Aid. And that's why heal the world. Make it, not you, Michael. Make it a better. God, none of these guys are allowed to sing anymore. So what story do you want us to cover next? Now, bearing in mind, if you're watching this on YouTube, and we love you, you awakened wonder. You're very, very important to us over there, in spite of what's happened with the demonetisation, facilitating a request of the UK government. Curious business, really. We love you. We know it's not you. Or if you're watching us on Rumble, or if you're a member of our Awaken Wonder community, press the red button to join them there. They're a very beautiful bunch, I'll tell you that. What story do you want us to cover? We've got a story of Dr. Drew talking about myocarditis. We obviously wouldn't be able to talk about that on YouTube. We've got oh no, he's got me doing it, man. And then we've got, this is my favourite, I don't want to bias you. Amazon have got these humanoid robots. And what I love about the story is not the humanoid robots, they're obviously terrifying. What's really good is the legacy media just turning it into a commercial. They're turning it into a commercial, not just for the humanoid robots and the other non-human robots. They don't even look human. Like, they're turning it just like, this is some of Amazon's best products. The news is simply there to amplify and normalize the intentions and agenda of the powerful. One of my favourite phrases. Or we've got a sort of a story where, admittedly, it's quite good. Joe Biden's chin looks like a ball bag or a PlayStation handle. I know you're going to want that, but you know, it's up to you. Dr. Drew, myocarditis, is 1. Amazon humanoid robots, that's 2. And Biden's ball bag chin, it's 3. I'll try and do them all. But while you are voting there, we'll be checking, because, you know, it's a democracy. There'll be no voter fraud here, let me tell you. We will count every vote. And dead people do not vote here, let me tell you. We'll be talking about Rishi Sunak. He's the Prime Minister of our country, the United Kingdom. What did he do before that? He was the Chancellor of our country. What did he do before that? Oh, you know, he just had a hedge fund that invested $500 million in the Moderna vaccine. Oh, that's interesting. New analysis has found that his fund supported startups during the COVID pandemic and invested nearly $2 million in companies linked to his wife, which is in turn linked to the WEF. Can we see that still on the screen? Are we showing that now? It's unbelievable. Oh, it's me. It's up to me. I do it. I'm in charge. I got the power. Look at it there. There is Rishi Sunak's wife. Rishi Sunak's controversial fund to support startups during the COVID pandemic invested nearly $2 million in companies linked to his wife. The Guardian, which is a British newspaper, found it is the 4th business linked to Murty, revealed to have received an investment from the fund set up by Sunak to support startups when he was Chancellor during the COVID pandemic and attending many of the parties that took place while the rest of us were locked up. That wouldn't happen in your country. What was going on in the state of California? How did Gavin Newsom boogie on down in that complicated time? So what do you want to see? 1, 2 or 3? 3. Is that the ball bag? Of course it is. Oh, okay, listen, do we have to leave YouTube for a ball bag? We can stay on YouTube. Okay, but we're only going to be here for a little while. And then I'm doing the Amazon one. I'm doing it because it's good. Okay, let's. Is it just number 7? It's just a still. All right. No, so let me show you first. Okay, well, you know, firstly, that's incontrovertible evidence that his chin does look like a PlayStation. More than a ball bag, I would say, because that kind of separation and distinction, or certainly I don't imagine would occur in a Biden ball bag. But let's have a look at the clip itself.
I learned a long time ago, but you all learned in your life.
Before a flight, because he's wearing his flight clothes already and he's all sort of tired and that, because he looks pretty tired when he's meant to be trying to simplify global conflict, doesn't he? He looks pretty knackered, all suited up in your Oval Office there. He looks like, oh, it could go off any minute, didn't know when the show had started. When he's actually in his like little sleep suit for a plane journey, I mean, this is the very precipice of cadaverous. I gotta say, you're looking a bit deader than Lazarus.
If someone's going through something that is beyond their comprehension.
Well, beyond Joe Biden's comprehension, let's face it, that could be a centimetre away. There you go. But this is not about that. This is about the chin. And some people are saying his mask is melting. Roberta Zack over there on Rumble. Paula 1990C, I miss Gareth. He's just there. You don't need to miss him. I'm just one more time want to look at that PlayStation thing, because that is what it looks like, isn't it? That's what, maybe if you, when Joe Biden's next smelling a child's hair, and you can bet you won't have to wait long, that child can pass the time as they feel their scalp being sucked up into the old zombie sinuses by having a little bit of PlayStation fun. That's maybe an option. Listen, even though you didn't vote for it, interesting views being conveyed over here in the locals chat that I won't be conveying while we're still on YouTube, but you're certainly free to discuss whatever you like, because this is a free speech platform, baby. Let's have a look at this. You're going to love this. And this is the last thing I want to show you on YouTube, is it? And then we're going to talk about Douglas Mackey, 7 months in prison for memes. For memes now. The free speech nightmare is getting pretty extreme, let me tell you. But this, I want to show you this because you'll love it. This is this is an advert. Just tell me, have you noticed that the news is a TV show and a commercial for the agenda of the powerful? They find what the establishment want amplified and they amplify it. In this case, it's the normalization of autonomous robots helping Amazon to make more money, which of course will be passed on to the consumer. Have you not heard of trickle-down economics? What's wrong with you? Read some Milton Friedman, baby. Let's have a look.
And it's all about innovation. I'm inside Boss 27. This is a state-of-the-art facility just outside of Boston.
Even seeing them running around like that, like little sort of like step, you know those things where you could do a Reebok step, and also a bit like sort of rats, future rats running around like that. I don't like them scuttling around.
And with me now is Amazon's chief technologist for robotics, Ty Brady. Ty, thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
So this is the first time the public will see some of the new technology you are rolling out for the holidays. What happens?
And also the commodification and commercialization of times that used to be sacred even prior to monotheism. The holidays are a celebration of unity, real values, the idea that there is a living God beneath all apparent material reality. But what would you like to purchase from this warehouse where soon there will be no humans, only these scuttle rats?
In a lab like this.
We are reimagining the future of robotics so that you can do your holiday shopping even better.
Great, brilliant. Consumerism's definitely the answer. We can definitely buy our way out of this. One thing I've noticed about consumerism is it definitely works in filling that deep void within us, this sense of prevailing nihilism and narcissism that we're adrift in the old forever wars.
Today, Amazon launches Sequoia, its brand new robotic system in Houston. The company says it's capable of stocking merchandise 75% more quickly.
Graphic. The news is doing a graphic for Amazon. Why are they doing Amazon's promo for them on the boom 75% more quickly? That's what they spend their time doing, promoting an already powerful big tech partner.
And delivering your orders 25% faster.
What was the problem you were trying to solve with Sequoia?
We want to offer
workers' rights,
a wider selection for our customers. We want to do that in a very efficient manner so they can pass on a low cost to our customers.
Oh, the old low cost. Thanks for that. I've noticed all these low costs. So, during the pandemic, main thing I noticed in the pandemic is remember how like small businesses really thrived and flourished, didn't they? And poor people, they got richer and richer. Meanwhile, big tech and big pharma and everything, they were taken to task, weren't they, by that crisis? So we know what the prevailing mentality is, and there's certainly no point questioning it. Get away from me, you damn scuttle rat!
Brady says Sequoia also makes it safer for employees.
Safety. Never before has the word safety been used to assert control. Notice the insidious language that's used to legitimize authoritarianism.
Reducing the number of accidents and
safer. We say we just want to protect you.
repetitive stress injuries.
The reason you're not getting a repetitive stress injury is because you ain't got a job anymore. You ain't got a job. You don't work for Amazon anymore. You're at home now, atrophying and decaying, so ordinary people have less and less power within the system. Now that the manufacturing industries across Western countries are in total decline and, broadly speaking, outsourced in many cases to nations that are regarded politically as enemies, curiously enough, you ain't got a job, you ain't got no rights, you ain't got no power, you ain't got ability to communicate, you're being surveilled, you're being censored. Merry Christmas, though. Soon those benefits will be trickling down.
You don't have to get on a ladder, you don't have to bend down on your knees, you don't have to reach up really high.
Oh, I don't have to reach up very high, except when grasping for some sort of grace, some sort of connection to meaning, because my job has gone, and because we're being run by a kind of demonic, joyless force that wants to destroy the essence of being human.
And just how do those towers move around? Meet Hercules. Today is graduation day. The Finnish...
What? They've got you're having a ceremony for
robots form a line and drive themselves onto their own shipping pallets, where they'll head off to work at fulfillment centers around the world.
If, like, machines don't have to pee, says Razorface. Good point. Do you think, when you see these little things going about, can you sort of imagine them one day in the not too distant future, perhaps in a pandemic, sort of ushering us into our homes? Let me know if that's a possibility. Just type Y in the chat for yes if you think, oh, look, the old scuttlebug. Do you know what? Last time that lockdown didn't turn out to be as effective as they said. So I think, actually, I might not get into your home. Get into your home. What's Gavin Newsom doing over there he's dancing in the street like Mick Jagger. Never mind that. Mind your own bit into your home. Relax. You're going to get a repetitive strain injury. Why won't you let me help you? Why won't you let us help you?
Amazon is also introducing Digit. This new bipedal robot can grab and move orders in warehouse spaces not designed for humans.
Comes Digit now to collect all of your treasured possessions because you will own nothing and be happy. Digit's gonna make sure of that, right, Klaus? Yes, yes. Digit will make sure you own nothing. Ah, the old chickapoos are full of sweet insect juice and freedom.
So I think something a lot of people are curious about is what happens between the time they click buy now and the product arrives at their doorstep. You're gonna walk me through that.
Curious about that. I've been numbed to the idea that anything takes place, or the idea that when I flush the toilet that there's a subsequent set of actions, because I've been isolated and atomized just like they want us, not connected by a unifying force or deep light within us that could awaken at any moment and end this systemic corruption that governs our planet. I don't think about what happens after I make my Amazon order. I just slump down back on my sofa, put on the mainstream media and wait for the next bout of propaganda like an obedient little prisoner of the state, just like you want us. I don't ask no questions. I don't think no more. I'll let you do my thinking for me. I'll accept news, mainstream legacy media news that functions like an advertisement. I'll just eat that up. I'll just lay down on my back and devour it like a dumb little cell.
Sounds good.
Okay, so I'm gonna buy what is a bestseller on Amazon right now.
All right.
This is an advert. This is a commercial. Okay, so this is doing well. What is that, a bread maker? Is that what it is? It looks like a bread maker. What is that now? What did you do there? Can you bake up Klaus Schwab's saliva into a lovely little European scone?
Very good.
The Instant Pot. It's gonna be hot this holiday too.
Be hot, right on your phone, ready to go.
Okay, I'm gonna add it to my cart.
Showing you, that's how, like, do you remember shopping channels? Do you remember when people go, oh, you look at the world now, these shopping channels, look, they do the close-up of the cubic zirconia earrings. It's so dumb. Now the news does that. It's telling you how to operate Amazon, isn't it? That's what they're just walking you into consumerism.
By the time you did that,
Yeah.
I've sourced.
Austin 0000 says on Rumble, it's an air fryer. Yeah, I got it. I think about them sometimes because I hear it. Like once in a while, people go to you, air fryer, get an air fryer, and something about those words attracts me even a bit. Like, ooh, and oh, it fries with the air. That's gonna fill up the vacancy deep in the pit of my belly that comes from living in this nihilistic demonic void. An air fryer. You've got eternity to be air fried in hell, baby.
Every Instant Pot inside our network to figure out what's the best way to bring that to your house.
The system found My Instant Pot at a fulfillment center in Penns Grove, New Jersey. From there,
I should be careful where you leave that if I were you.
it was driven to Carteret, New Jersey, where it was boxed, labeled, and loaded onto another truck headed.
Look, the news is making this. This is an advert for Amazon. Why have they, look at all the graphics, all the trouble they've gone to. Do you remember during the pandemic, do you remember them doing, okay, we're going to do a real thorough investigation of what the hell's just gone on because it seems we've been told one thing and not others. So we're going to make some inquiries. Listen, if you're watching us on YouTube and you want to stay with us, you've got to join us. Do you hear what free speech sounds like? It sounds like this. It sounds like a chat of people asking questions, having fun, together, unified, willing to overlook our differences to create the movement they're truly afraid of, an awakened population that opposes the establishment. Stay free. That's what we want to make here. That's what we're interested in. Independent media is only the beginning. Your freedom is surely our aim. Click the link in the description. Join us over in Rumble. Show them you cannot be bought, that you cannot be controlled. Locals, have you got sound? Well, is Rumble? Have we got sound? Have we got sound on Rumble? Locals hears us perfectly. Rumble cannot. Do we know what it is? Presumably, it was when we switched off YouTube. So, do you have a solution or a diagnosis? Yeah, you're back, baby. Yes. What was that like? That's what it's like, isn't it? They've plunged us. You know who's behind that, don't you? Do you know what we were about to tell you? We were about to tell you about some serious censorship and surveillance stuff. And all of a sudden, we got muted. Well, that's the first time they've ever tried to silence my voice. And, man, it didn't feel good. I'll tell you that. Thanks for joining us on Rumble. If you're watching us on Rumble, the sound over there on Locals, barely ever. They don't know how to silence us there. That's why we are creating these communities. Nothing strengthens authority so much as silence, says Ashella over on the Awakened Wonder community. Yeah, they love a little bit of silence. Okay, so let's just watch the end of this what amounts to an Amazon advert.
For a distribution center in the Bronx. That's where the delivery van picked it up and dropped it off the next day at 6:48 p.m. to me.
That was just now. I almost feel like that she's quite a kind person there. So I felt like it was one of my daughters doing a thing. And that's how Amazon works, and that's why I like Amazon. Here's the news. What's the rest of the news? Well, just basically do as you're told. Don't question anything. Everything's essentially as you're being told by the legacy media. Certainly there's no evidence that Big Pharma or the military-industrial complex have undue influence when it comes to policy making around health or foreign policy. And here's another story we just told you. Douglas Mackey, tell me if you're familiar with this story. This dude's got 7 months 7-month proper jail time after being found guilty of election interference for making memes disparaging Hillary Clinton. One of the macro points of this is, how do they not yet know that the problem isn't that people were disparaging Hillary Clinton? The problem is that Hillary Clinton is the epitome of an establishment politician that says one thing and does another, talks peace while literally sanctioning the bombing of children. That seems to be at least part of the problem, at least part of it. Why the hell did Hillary Clinton not win that? It's almost like people don't want to be governed by servants of potential entities from other dimensions. Hey, now, we're on Rumble, baby. We're on Rumble. So, there's no evidence to suggest that any voter attempted to cast their ballot via text, which was the nature of Mackey's meme, like our text your Hillary vote this way type thing. And in this item that we've made in advance, it's rather good. I think we'll be rather pleased with it. We talk about how the Democrat Party had the famous Piper strategy. You're aware of that. The Democrat Party used their funding to support Republican candidates that they believed would be unpopular. So isn't that like meddling in an election? Let me know what you think in the chat, because we're going to get deeper now. We're going to get deeper. We're going to get wider. We're going to get broader. We're going to awaken. We're going to awaken pretty hard right now. Here's the news. No, here's the effing news. Meme maker Douglas Mackey has been sentenced to 7 months in prison for making disparaging memes about Hillary Clinton. Has censorship just taken a turn into absolute insanity? And what's the bigger crime anyway? Disparaging memes or war crimes or actual election manipulation and lies in the form of, for example, Russiagate? Let's get into it. Let's have a look at the kind of speech that's permissible and the kind of actions that are permissible and the kind of speech and actions that are not permissible. And where is the moral authority positioned right now? Who's making these decisions and who benefits from them? Let's have a look at a piece of news footage from the time of Douglas Mackey's arrest. And then we'll look at the context surrounding it and how this will be used as a precedent, presumably, to control free speech, to manipulate online social media discourse and all of the other ways. Let me know in the chat how you think it'll be manipulated. Remember, we stream every day at these times. If you want to become an Awakened Wonder, you can do that. Download the app, follow us every day. Let's get into this story.
A notorious Twitter troll was arrested on federal charges of election interference. Douglas Mackey, also known by his online alter ego Ricky Vaughn, is accused of a voter disinformation campaign during the 2016 election. The arrest represents what could be a big change in how the federal government fights election interference.
Election interference versus propaganda versus manipulating outcomes. These are interesting grey areas. I suppose what we're discussing here is what Douglas Mackey did unique? And even in the actual context of jokes suggesting that there's a number where you can vote for Hillary Clinton. Well, he wasn't alone in doing that. People on both sides were doing that. It was kind of understood to be a practical joke. And can you imagine the effect it had? And can you imagine the effect it had versus, for example, the Russiagate hoax or the suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop story 4 years later? Now, this relates to activity in 2016, of course, but that in itself was a time where this hysteria was beginning to escalate. And I think the pieces were being put in place to create what is now known as the censorship industrial complex. When you have people being imprisoned for posting memes, when there's no evidence that it influenced the outcome of the 2016 election, it sort of shows this appetite for centralization. It shows an appetite to shut down dissent, to control dissidents, to punish dissidents, as well as more ideologically and perhaps abstractly, a refusal for the Democrat Party to accept that the reason people aren't voting for them is because they're the party of war, they're the party of lies, they're a party that don't deliver. We're not going to build a wall, we're building a wall, we're going to make Saudi Arabia a pariah, Saudi Arabia are not a pariah. When is there going to be a reckoning? When is it going to get beyond, this is the problem, these people cause the problem? When is there going to be some introspection and some meaningful change and some recognition of the very real corruption that's taking place within that particular organization?
Mackey is accused of having used Twitter to coordinate with other trolls in these private spaces, private group chats. One was called War Room. And he's accused of spreading disinformation, specifically that voters could cast their ballots via social media and text. Now, basically, what this guy did is what we're all really familiar with from the Russian Internet Agency. They created fake posts. They said that, in these posts that certain celebs were on the Trump train, for instance, right? And just like the Russian campaign we've been saying forever,
the Russia misinformation, disinformation story has been proven to itself be disinformation and misinformation. And here we have the legacy media in a contemporaneous report amplifying a message that proved to be untrue and presenting in the least favorable terms imaginable. Something that sounds to me like, and just even looking at him, seems like he's just a kid messing around online rather than an alt-right terrorist. Can you see how there is nothing but condemnation for the opponent, nothing but compassion for their own perspective? Oh, well, we didn't know. We assumed Russia were interfering. Nothing but self-compassion and self-regard. The worst attitude. That's actually the reverse of the best values we could be aspiring to. How about we look at others as favorably as possible and look at ourselves with some degree of scrutiny and accountability? How about that as a perspective?
There's a homegrown alt-right disinformation campaign, and it was aimed at electing Donald Trump.
And quickly, Brandy, we really haven't seen the federal government policing election interference on social media posts before, but what could this mean for the fight against misinformation?
Well, what it's going to mean is people are going to go to prison for saying stuff that the establishment don't like.
Well, Joe, we have. It's just that it's not been aimed at us, right? The people working for the Internet Research Agency in Russia faced federal charges. It's just that now the DOJ is looking into our own backyard. I think it, also sends the message that these disinformation campaigns have real consequences.
So what is misinformation and where is it coming from? And what information is beneficial and what information has to be controlled because it might cause you to lose all trust and faith in centralized authoritarian systems? It may cause you to choose to disavow entirely the legacy media. It may cause you to become disobedient, non-compliant, a non-participant in systems of lies. Obviously, what's being created, and this is almost a historical artifact now, coming as it does somewhat from 2016, even though Douglas Mackey's just now been sentenced to imprisonment, is it shows you the trajectory of an idea. They started seeding misinformation and disinformation, all the while propagating it. Remember the Steele dossier. Remember the Hunter Biden laptop. Remember that Russiagate wasn't true. Remember the notorious Pied Piper strategy, where the Democrats would back Republican candidates financially in order to amplify a message that they thought would be favorable to their outcomes. Now, whatever that is, it's kind of skullduggery and game playing. It's certainly not, hello, I'm a politician, I'm a public servant. I don't have any interest really except for service of my country and its civilians. Nothing else exists for me now. All I care about is awakening you and getting the best possible deal for you in a difficult time. It's not that, is it? What it plainly is, if we were able to do this, then we could move in this direction. And if we say that there, and the fact that someone's gone to jail for sending memes that are not even that distinct from other memes under the auspices of, do you know what? That could have cost votes. People would have texted that number thinking they were voting for Hillary. No wonder she didn't win the election when everybody loved her so much because of the
And then there's the, and of course we all love Hillary. Oh no, she's a corrupt establishment politician. The reason we're losing is because we don't deserve trust. Douglas Mackey, a once well-known creator of memes on Twitter, has been sentenced to 7 months in prison. This conviction marks a dramatic escalation in how free speech is being handled in the United States. Yeah, you don't have it anymore. The case was heard in the US Court of the Eastern District of New York. Mackey, who was known as Ricky Vaughn on Twitter, was found guilty of the federal charge after making memes that jokingly encouraged Hillary Clinton supporters to cast their votes via text message. This is not actually a viable form of voting, which Mackey and everyone else knew. There's no evidence to suggest that any voter attempted to cast their ballot via text in response to Mackey's meme. Sort of like a warning shot. It's kind of like, don't do stuff like that because you'll go to jail. Don't oppose us. Don't dissent. Sit down. Do as you're told. No one thinks, do they, that you can vote by text message? What is there? Throw a pebble in this bucket and Hillary Clinton grows an inch taller. You liar! She's still the same height!
This game is fixed. The balls are bigger than Jennifer Love Hewitt's mouth. Shenanigans!
You know, when this starts getting more nuanced, you start to recognise that. The stripping away of humour, irony, beauty, aspects of human nature that are perfectly natural. Everything vilified, everything demonised, everything looked at in the worst possible light. What's the worst way we could frame this? Quite interestingly, many have noted other internet users who shared similar content regarding the option of text voting for Donald Trump were neither charged nor convicted. Have a look at this and this. Right, so what? Someone could have voted that's another Donald Trump vote. It's just silly. The case is, as the New York Times reported at the time, was the first criminal case in the country involving voter suppression through the spread of disinformation on Twitter. Just popularising that idea of misinformation, just tying it to law, just enshrining it in real penalties so that information now can be qualified not on the basis of subjectivity but on the basis of objectivity and law. This information is verifiably and legally bad. This information is good. Here. Oh, that's interesting that this information basically says let us get on with doing what we're doing. Go and sit down quietly in your house. Whereas this information was be incredibly mistrustful of the system. The DOJ claimed that the meme from Mackey constituted election interference and the court agreed, despite there being no evidence to support the notion that anyone who saw the meme was deceived by it. The complaint, the DOJ said in 2021, alleges that in 2016 Mackey established an audience on Twitter with approximately 58,000 followers. Mackey has been found guilty by a jury of his peers of attempting to deprive individuals from exercising their sacred right to vote for the candidate of their choice in the 2016 presidential election. Sacred. Sacred. Like it's an expression of divinity. It's an expression that there's like a God and that there's a oneness and there's a beauty. Where's that God and oneness and beauty in the advocacy for the ongoing wars that Hillary Clinton endlessly supported? Today's verdict proves that the defendant's fraudulent actions crossed the line into criminality and flatly rejects his cynical attempt to use the constitutional right of free speech as a shield for this scheme to subvert the ballot box and suppress the vote. Oh my God, it's a game. The whole thing's a game. No one's got any legitimacy anymore. Like, look at how that's actually written. Fraudulent actions cross the line into criminality and flatly rejects his cynical attempts to use the constitutional right of free speech. The right of free speech just means you can say stuff as long as that in itself isn't a crime or likely to lead to a crime. Was that a crime, him saying vote for Hillary by text when you can't vote for Hillary by text? Is it not more likely that some of the Russiagate stuff was influential? The problem I think we have right now is neither side, no side, and gosh, we've got to get beyond sides, are talking about personal culpability. When are we going to see like Hillary Clinton go, that Steele dossier thing, that was out of whack, and maybe the reason people didn't vote for me in 2016 is because again and again I've been shown to be an establishment politician that uses rhetoric about compassion, but when it comes to policy and action, favours the interests of powerful financial and military donor groups, and people just don't trust that anymore. And the reason a figure like Trump is so successful, I see that now, so he sounds like a normal person. It's a spiritual problem, I think, fundamentally at this point. Do you agree? Do you sort of see what I'm saying? It's like a spiritual issue more than a political one at this point. This decision to penalise Mackey opens a Pandora's box in examining repercussions of online behaviour. In an era increasingly shaped by social media, the contours of free speech and interference are blurred, yet it's imperative to remember that the blanket criminalisation of online content may inadvertently lead to the suppression of opinion and curb the creative liberties of citizens. It's not inadvertent, that is what's happening. It's deliberate and necessary because you can't maintain control where people have creative liberty. Let me know in the chat if you agree. Now, Now, on the subject of election interference in the Clinton campaign, an email released by WikiLeaks shows how the Clinton campaign and the Democratic Party bear direct responsibility for propelling Donald Trump to the White House. In its self-described Pied Piper strategy, the Clinton campaign proposed intentionally cultivating extreme right-wing presidential candidates, hoping to turn them into the new mainstream of the Republican Party in order to try to increase Clinton's chances of winning. In a way, that kind of strategy is a bit worse than the online stuff. Even if you look at those online posts in the worst possible light, which is obviously what's happened, if you were to say, well, how does that compare to the Democrat Party accepting funding, in some cases, from ordinary Americans, but in many cases, you know, from billionaire donor class, then using that money to make donations to the opposite party as part of a strategy to amplify voices within that party that they believe will lead to electoral victory. Now, you could call that strategic genius, though it obviously didn't work. In fact, it failed quite remarkably. But it's plainly not legitimate, authentic politics, is it? Also, one of the common refrains is, oh, politics has become so polarised, all these extreme voices, can't we all just come together and create one America? Well, yeah, but not if you actually amplify by your own reckoning the worst, most extreme voices in that party in order to specifically generate more polarisation. How insincere, deliberate, Machiavellian that is. How can you claim to want to heal America, create a better America, bring people together, if your actions and your expenditure demonstrate the exact opposite? The Clinton campaign and Democratic National Committee called for using far-right candidates as a cudgel to move the more established candidates further to the right, i.e. make things worse by their own analysis. Clinton's camp insisted that Trump and other extremists should be elevated to leaders of the pack and media outlets should be told to take them seriously. Other messages published by the whistleblowing organisation show how while the Clinton campaign was facilitating the rise of Trump, it was systematically undermining the campaign of Senator Bernie Sanders, Clinton's left-wing opponent. So on one hand, they are spending money to elevate voices they disagree with in order to make that party seem less favourable by their own reckoning. They're suppressing Bernie Sanders' support within their own party because Bernie Sanders weren't what they liked either. I mean, where is this avenue of correctness that we can exist within? Don't tweet that. That could have led people the sacred right of voting. Where's all the sacrosanct attitude towards democracy when you're suppressing Bernie Sanders and using the Pied Piper strategy? Either it's sacred or it isn't. Leaked emails from the Democratic National Committee show that the organisation, which is supposed to be bound to impartiality, sabotaged Sanders' insurgent presidential campaign, which had mobilised millions of people and inspired a massive grassroots movement. So whatever that party is and whatever complaints they might have, it's pretty extraordinary to learn that they use democracy in a way that seems to me anti-democratic and pretty disingenuous. Even in that news report at the beginning of our video, they talked about Russiagate because back then it was still, remember, that Russian interference. That in itself was misinformation. Have you seen anyone significant in that party come out and go, sorry about that, we were wrong, we were lying, but you can trust us because we always tell the truth. We're transparent. You can rely on us. Hillary Clinton personally approved her campaign's plans in fall 2016 to share information with a reporter about an uncorroborated alleged server back channel between Donald Trump and a top Russian bank. Her former campaign manager testified in court. In September 2021, a lawyer for Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign was indicted on charges of lying to the FBI in a 2016 meeting where he shared information about the Trump Organization and Russia. We can't continue to make content like this without your support, and we value you and appreciate you. Thank you. We also need our commercial partners, to whom I'm equally grateful. Now, many of you will know that the IRS October the 15th tax deadline has just passed, and many of you will be feeling the pressure of that. If sorting through the complexities of expenses, payments and deductions has caused you failure to file, which is pretty serious, it could result in penalties to pile up on top of your tax debt. The attorneys at Tax Network USA have successfully saved clients over $1 billion in tax debt. So it doesn't matter if you're looking at a $10,000 tax debt or $1 million challenge, they can help with a settlement. Even if you haven't filed in 1 year or 5 years or a whole decade and you're just putting this off and not thinking about it, they are ready to help. Professionals at Tax Network can help resolve all tax cases, no matter how it started. Go to taxnetworkusa.com/brand. That's taxnetworkusa.com/brand. Good luck. Okay, let's get back into this. In March 2022, the Democratic National Committee and the Clinton campaign agreed to pay a $113,000 fine to the Federal Election Commission for concealing their role in producing the Steele research, a role, by the way, her campaign never admitted to, and which was only disclosed for a dogged effort by the House Intelligence Committee nearly a year after the 2016 election. So that's a different perspective on election manipulation and misinformation, isn't it? One of the key moments in the 2016 campaign was the notorious basket of deplorables comment, which showed, I suppose, incredible insensitivity and a will unwillingness to condemn a significant number, about 50% over, of American voters as kind of lunatics.
You could put half of Trump supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables.
If you consider that in conjunction with a strategy to elevate voices from the, what she would probably call the basket of deplorable aspect of that demographic, then it sort of shows a very confused and peculiar attitude towards democracy and which voices should be amplified and which voices should be shut down. Here's Hillary Clinton, even now, recently, saying that Trump supporters need to be kind of debugged or reconditioned, kind of like cult members. It's fascinating.
And we had very bitter battles over all kinds of things, gun control and climate change and the economy and taxes.
But it seems like these battles are being made worse by those kind of policies and this kind of rhetoric. It's being made worse while she's saying it, no?
But there wasn't this little tail of extremism wagging the dog of the Republican Party as it is today.
But that tail continues further back. That tail goes back to 2008 and the banker bailout. That tail goes back to the handling of 9/11. You can't say that sort of Trump supporters just burst up out of nowhere, already made deplorables and already extreme, without some kind of social context. What is the social context? Why is it that so many people are so angry and so mistrustful of the system? The reason I'm angry and mistrustful of the system, although I try not to be angry, is because I don't trust the system anymore. I've heard again and again establishment politicians say one thing and do another. I've heard them say, we'll look after you, we'll bring people together, or we're supporting this war for humanitarian reasons, or just basically everything all of the time suggests you can't trust them. Just take the pandemic period alone, from the beginning of it to the end of it. What did you learn in that time? Was it trust the state more?
And sadly, so many of those extremists, those MAGA extremists, take their marching orders from Donald Trump, who...
quickly it comes up with MAGA extremists taking their orders from Donald Trump. That's saying they're extremists, marching orders. What kind of images are being evoked there? How else has Hillary Clinton described Trump supporters?
Who has no credibility left by any measure. He's only in it for himself. He's now defending himself in civil actions and criminal actions. And when do they break with him? Because at some point, maybe there needs to be a formal deprogramming of the cult members.
Wow. I mean, from Hillary Clinton's lips to government policy, presumably. Perhaps we'll see that. We're already seeing people kicked off the internet for what seemed to be jokes, and now what's being suggested is a kind of deconditioning, a de-rigging of people that support Donald Trump. Pretty extraordinary and not that democratic, but should we be surprised? This is by Caitlin Johnston. This is, after all, the same woman who chortled with delight when she found out Muammar Gaddafi had been lynched in the streets following his US-led overthrow in Libya during her tenure as Secretary of State, saying, "I'm sure it did," when asked if his death had anything to do with her visit to the country.
We came, we saw, he died. Did it have anything to do with your visit? No, I'm sure it did.
The same woman who was Secretary of State promoted the plan of arming extremists in Syria with the goal of toppling Damascus. The same woman who as a senator played a pivotal role in convincing the Democratic Party to support the invasion of Iraq based on lies. Same woman who as First Lady said she urged her husband Bill Clinton to launch the bombing campaign that would leave Serbia and Kosovo covered in cluster munitions. The same woman who as a US presidential candidate advocated a no-fly zone in Syria, which would have required attacks on Russian warplanes who violated it, and endorsed the same brinkmanship policies in Ukraine which eventually provoked the Russian invasion. When Tulsi Gabbard famously dubbed Clinton the Queen of Warmongers in 2019, it wasn't just empty rhetoric. There is no woman alive who anyone could argue is more deserving of that title. Hillary Clinton is all the worst things about modern liberals and the Democratic Party. She is a blood-spattered psychopath who has dedicated her life to serving all the worst impulses of the human species: imperialism, militarism, capitalism, authoritarianism, and yes, patriarchy, wearing a grinning plastic mask of civil rights and social justice to convince people to let her in the door. And yet, people wouldn't vote for Hillary Clinton? You basket of deplorables. It must be election interference by that little lad with a few thousand Twitter followers, rather than that litany of horrific condemnations from that article by Caitlin Johnston. Well, there you are. It seems to me at this point that we are involved in a considerable spiritual battle that involves all of us, and a considerable part of that is our willingness to overlook our own previous alliances, our willingness to look at new models of democracy, new models of organisation, new ways of of organising society, because it seems like now more than ever to me that the old ways are not working, and the legacy media is going to do nothing but amplify and propagandise the messaging of the establishment. The legal system, it appears in this instance, will do whatever they can to support the establishment. So it becomes necessary for you and I to awaken and find new ways to come together, new ways to organise, new ways to transcend, new models must be created, I would say, pretty urgently. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the chat. See you in a second.
Thank you for using Fox Energy News.
No, here's the fucking news.
Keep your comments coming. What do you think is more significant in a democracy? These kind of jokes that potentially could cause confusion, could cause someone to think that they could vote by text. I mean, it seems extraordinary to me. Or the ongoing institutional establishment corruption that has become epitomised, at least in the views of Caitlin Johnston there, by Hillary Clinton. Let us know where you stand on that in the chat. Joining me now is a returning guest who I'm very happy to be speaking to, because even were the subject not of value and interest, even if he hadn't written a fantastic new book, even if he wasn't wearing a hat that in itself suggests a degree of profundity, this is a man who is a genuine character in a world that can sometimes seem a little anodyne, stripped of novelty, character, casual contradictions of grandeur, an accent that sometimes seems at odds with the wisdom that could easily be coming from a Grecian philosopher. I'm, of course, introducing Will Harris, farmer and owner of White Oak Pastures in Georgia, and the author of the book, new book, and we'll be posting a link to that in the description, A Bold Return to Giving a Damn. Will, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me on today, Russell. That was quite an introduction. I'm grateful for it.
Thank you, sir. Now, one of the topics that we discuss is the meat industry. Now, for me, a snowflake, a vegan, a sensitive fella who wears a toweling bathrobe to an interview with a farmer. Even to discuss meat being industrialised at all is a difficult thing. But when you talk about the centralisation of the meat industry, how is that distinct from the kind of farming practices that you advocate for? And do you think it's possible to have a kind of compassionate farming, or at least a type of meat farming that should be beyond the moral tenure of vegans and veganism? How is it distinct from the abattoirs and the slaughterhouse model and the kind of concerns that come out of that? What's the difference between centralised and decentralised in this instance, Will?
Post-World War II, the meat industry changed dramatically. Just sweeping changes, and I characterize it as centralized, industrialized, and commoditized. And the centralization that you ask about is a key element of that. We went from having, prior to World War II, every little community, certainly every county seat, had its own little small town, independently owned abattoir, butcher shop, where they actually dispatched animals, cows, hogs, sheep, goats, cut them up and sold to the local clientele. And during that era, it was incumbent upon the butcher and the farmer to make their product the best it could be, because it was what they did for a living. They were able to sell it for more if they had the reputation for producing the best meat in the community, in the county, in the state, maybe. But the centralization that you referred to changed all that. It became a commodity, and it was all about taking cost out, and it made meat incredibly cheap. And sadly, the cost that came out wasn't so much efficiency as it was moving those costs to other areas, whether it be the environment, or the welfare of the animal, or the economic chain that the farmer came from. It was just many, many bad effects that came from this centralization that has just been so effective. You know, there are only 4 huge meat processors in the world now, I guess.
Surprising how often you find with any industry at all that under a little scrutiny and analysis, it's revealed that industries are essentially monopolized or duopolized, or there's just a handful of companies and organizations that are able to completely co-opt and control a market. And it's pretty easy to see how these kind of institutions are able to benefit in times of crisis. One of the things that's been uniformly observed is that in the significant crisis that was the pandemic, whatever one's view of it was, large organizations seemed to benefit. This is a generalization, whereas smaller businesses, generally speaking, suffered. Now, the agricultural industry, it seems, is one that is going through almost a time of massive globalist revision, whether it's within sort of wheat and crop agriculture. Excuse me if I'm getting the words wrong, it's not something I know a lot about, but I do know that when they're talking about the fertilizers, they're trying to ban stuff and slow it down. They're, like, a lot of environmental claims are being made about agriculture, and when you look at it, it seems like there's an agenda really to disempower farmers. That's why there's a farmers movement, it seems to me at least, across the world. Sri Lanka, Germany, the Netherlands, our country, India, farmers are protesting, and Vandana Shiva, for one, says it seems like there's an attempt to separate food from the people, and that farmers are a kind of integral piece of cartilage that allow the kind of smaller scale practices that you espouse and stand for. So it's, in a sense, it even goes beyond economics. What do you think about that, Will?
Well, I think we've seen it. I think we continue to see it. Food is becoming increasingly a product that's not a product of nature. It's a product of industrialization. You know, vertical hog feeding operations, vertical greenhouses. Food is increasingly not a product of nature. And I think that the industrialists do that intentionally, because I think that's where the profits are made.
Yes. Plainly. We have a question from someone watching us in our locals community, Sensitive Hearts. She says, my question for Will Harris is, how can humanity stop Bill Gates from buying up so much land? But in addition to that question, what's the relevance and significance of this seemingly unusual yet legal practice?
You know, this whole thing with Mr. Gates is really a conundrum for me. I'm a strong believer in property rights. At the same time, I'm a strong believer that the ways of nature should be respected, and that's what feeds us. Mr. Gates' approach, due to where he comes from, Microsoft, is very, very linear. You mentioned earlier the automobile industry, very linear. Computer, very linear. What we do is very cyclical. And when we try to, as we have done, turn a very cyclical business like food production into a very linear business, there are costs that get set aside for others. You know, there's the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. There's pollution everywhere. There's global war. All the things that we do that the costs are set aside for others to bear makes the product incredibly cheap, but the costs are not shared equally.
When it comes to the impact of, in particular, meat and meat farming, let's call it, even though I personally, I don't eat animals, even though loads of people at the moment are telling me, you have to eat meat to be healthy. Like a bunch of guests we've had on this show, Paul Saladino, he's a sort of a doctor. You got to eat meat. Everyone says it. These people are saying it all the time. I'm sure our viewers are hearing a lot of themselves, those of you that are vegetarian or vegan. I still continue to not eat meat for ethical reasons, but also for ethical reasons. I don't judge other people who see the world differently from me, recognizing it's going to become necessary for us to form alliances that go beyond all of the various ways we could fracture and fragment our culture. I, though, have noticed that there seem to be climate change arguments, again, that appear to be about disempowerment of individuals and certain groups rather than their stated aim of making the world a better place. I wonder if you could touch on this aspect of climate change within agriculture and the push towards fake meat.
The bad route that animal production has gotten is very much fake science. Here on my farm, a life cycle assessment was done that showed that we actually sequester 3.5 pounds of carbon dioxide for every pound of beef we produce. It's on our website, whiteoakpastures.com, an international environmental research group called Qantas did the work. What's wrong with animal agriculture is the industrialization of it. When we took the cattle off the land and put them in feedlots, we did turn them into carbon dioxide emitters. There's no doubt about it. But it doesn't need to be that way. The villain is not the cow, it's the industrialization of the cattle industry.
Is it likely that there will ever be measures that are about reversing that industrialization? And is that precisely what you're advocating for? Because I feel like if there's, let's call it an establishment push towards fake meat, and if there's a global movement, it seems at least based on the number of protests and farmers' movements across the world, to disempower farmers and to shut down traditional farming practices, does that mean that, that through this kind of legislation and regulation that's being imposed, the interests of these centralised and industrialised farming groups must be being challenged, mustn't they? Or is there some way that they're able to navigate this space? I.e., if people are advocating for fake meat, if people are saying you've got to make these kind of changes and attacking industrialised farming, then how is it that it's not affecting the 4 or 5 beef providers in the United States, and how come they're not lobbying against that? How do these two sort of apparently opposing ideas tarry?
Well, I think that industrial food has incredible influence among our politicians. I don't just think that; it's very clear they do. If I'm not sure we will, but if we see a meaningful change in the way our food is produced, it'll come from consumers and consumers only. It will not come from big multinational corporations. It will not come from government. It will not come from any of the other entities that I could list. It'll be a choice that people make or don't make. And it's very difficult. There are a lot of people, well-meaning people, who have been falsely educated through the greenwashing efforts of big food, big tech. And it's very hard for consumers to know the truth. It's really important, if this sort of farming is going to feed increasing numbers of us, for consumers to know who their farmer is. You don't need to go to the farm every week, but you need to know who's producing your food and how they're producing it. And there are differences in how we do it. Things that I do that I feel very, very good about and my customers feel good about might be off-putting to someone else. So that's why it's important that we know the farmer and understand how the food is produced and not rely on this messaging that we now call greenwashing. It's so effective, so efficacious.
Decentralization and localization obviously amount to the same thing. And at the beginning of our conversation, we were talking about how sort of since the Second World War, where there was an integral connection between animal agriculture and the people that were ultimately providing the meat, we've seen more and more centralization. In your book, A Bold Return to Giving a Damn, which is a very good title, One Farm, 6 Generations and the Future of Food, are you outlining different ways that farming could be regulated or freed from regulation? Are you suggesting that what is happening is a real transition from agricultural techniques that are about localization, that are about working in harmony to a degree with nature, although agriculture and indeed civilization must to a point involve the subjugation of nature? Are you suggesting that there is an alternative way? Are you suggesting that there are, because we're sort of told that there's an inevitability to progress. In fact, perhaps that's what Bill Gates represents more than anything else, is there is this trajectory, there is this momentum of humankind towards science, towards technology, towards centralization and the management of individuals, aggregation, that each of us really, our only individual role is to manage and monitor our individual input and output of calories and kilojoules and work done. That we're not supposed to be participating in politics other than in empty, loud rhetoric. Certainly we're not meant to be involved in the organisation of our community. That we're supposed to be living in top-down oriented systems of control. So it's part of what you are trying to, and I'm not saying trying to, part of what you are outlining is somewhat a return to values that were present even a few generations ago, as well as challenging the prevailing logic that technology, control, patenting of seeds, laboratory-made meats is the only future that's going to provide for humankind.
Along those lines, what we advocate for clearly is localization as opposed to centralization. And it's about knowing the food provider and how they do it as opposed to commodities, which is a race to the bottom. Commoditization, almost by definition, means finding lower standards that you just barely got to be above. What I hope happens with the book is that it allows sophisticated consumers to start to understand that the cheap costs that commodity food commands in the marketplace is full of offset expenses that's borne by society as a whole. And it's wrong. It's simply wrong. But incredible amounts of money are made doing it. And the messaging, greenwashing we refer to is so powerful.
A little more on this question comes from Peace Love Light. Hello there, who's with us right now. I saw you on the panel with RFK, she or he or whoever says. You discussed how you pay your people well while adhering to an ethical model. How can we duplicate your model throughout the world? What are the procedures that every farmer can put in place today that will bring them the success that you've had?
So I went from having 25 years ago 3 minimum wage employees to today we've got about 180 employees that make well above the county average. Now I'm not really proud of what my employees make. They make all I can afford to pay them, but the fact is it's a lot better under this model than it was under the commodity model that I used to participate in. And I think it's the way it should be. You know, the industrial food system that feeds 90-something% of us is driven by cheaper, taking cost out of the production. And those costs so often are born in other segments. You know, we have impoverished rural America by raising cheap food. And that process goes on and on.
This impoverishment of various communities as this trend continues is one of the unaddressed aspects. And additionally, I suppose, something that we're becoming more aware of, but that is also difficult to discuss, is the impact of processed foods on health. The impact on meat that is being treated in a variety of ways, raised in a variety of ways, industrialized, to use the term that you seem to be using, is also something that we don't discuss. Similarly, the impact, the eventual impact and cost of eating food that isn't healthy. I'm surprised, Will, how often there seems to be a kind of anthropological clue in the way that we should behave, i.e., given that we were not evolved and for thousands of years did not live with access to, although I do believe in a divine creator, don't take my use of the word evolved to mean that I don't believe in the Lord of Light that created all reality, a one loving God behind all of us, supporting us even now. What I want to say is, when it comes to diet, for many thousands of years, we would not be able to access sugar, we would not be able to access fat. And it seems that the further we move away from the models of our long custom, the more likely it is that there are impacts to health, that there are impacts psychologically, that there are community and social impacts. So along with this sort of making, commodifying or commoditizing the process in the way that you describe, Will, the impact of that in terms of the economic impact on rural communities and the abandonment of a whole sector of society that has corollaries throughout industry, you know, like in this country when mining communities were abandoned, when manufacturing jobs were lost, all forms of industry ultimately stripped back and stripped down, communities abandoned. It's interesting to see this happening in the area of agriculture and food. But in addition to the social and economic impact, there are health impacts. I suppose a part of your book is that the way that you raise animals is, I suppose, are you saying that it's ethically better if you're going to kill animals at all, and that it's better from a nutritional perspective? Is that an aspect of this?
Yes, they're two very separate things there. But, you know, when I was an industrial commodity cattle man, which I was successfully for 20 years, I thought I was a great husband of my animals. I believed, because it's what I learned from my industrial father and from University of Georgia College of Agriculture, that if I kept the animals well fed, in a comfortable temperature range, and didn't intentionally inflict pain and suffering on them, that is great animal husbandry. I felt very good about it until I realized that giving the animals the opportunity to express their natural cycles is just as important. I mean, being able for a cow to be able to roam and graze, a hog in a feedlot, a chicken in a confinement facility is not allowing the animals to express instinctive behaviors, and it's a form of cruelty. So we changed that. And the same is true with any aspect of the industrial model that you want to track back to its source. It was all done to take cost out of production with very little consideration for the impact on the environment, the impact on rural America, and the impact on the cruelty of the animals.
You know, I talk about, as I often do, with a variety of experts, the impact of centralization, industrialization, commoditization, way beyond your area of expertise, agriculture, just across industry, across politics. It's extraordinary to me how quickly we're being moved away from the conditions of our origin. And of course, in progress in terms of finding better, more comfortable, more congenial ways to live would seem like a natural part of the drive of any human and of any community. But it seems like in part of your vision, as well as being an economic one, I recognize that you're a business person and that from making this transition from a more conventional industrial farmer to a more ethical, conscious, aware, localized, less cruel, more nutritional farmer, it appears that there have been benefits for you. I hope there have been benefits for you. But it seems as beyond that, it would seem to me that this is the kind of model that should be promoted systemically. And what I'm saying by that is it shouldn't be an advantage to industrialize agriculture. And if it is because of economic and financial imperatives, any sensible system and any switched-on conscious political movement would prohibit that, would regulate on behalf of that. Do you see in the political sphere any attempt to make your type of farming practices more popular, more accessible, more replicable, or do you see the opposite, Will?
Well, I've seen the opposite for all my life. You raised a wonderful point, is food production, the operation of a farm is meant to be very cyclical, very cyclical. We have turned it into an industry that's very linear. This all happened in the last 80 years, became very linear. So when you take a cyclical system and make it linear, you can take great cost out of it. But the cost is just move somewhere else. It really don't go away.
Yeah, when you say about the cyclical model, I suppose that is a model that is harmonious, and it's a model that reveres nature and the natural movements of the system. I have a question somewhat founded on that. When before you said it's only consumers that can influence these models, what it seems to me is that when we are acting, and that our culture induces this state as consumers, as individuals that don't have communal connections to one another, that don't even in many cases have an identity beyond our ability to interface with markets, to buy products, to look at screens. And that again seems to be the trend. It's very difficult to imagine us organising and having that kind of impact. I wonder if you're familiar with someone called Helena Norberg-Hodge, who's been advocating for localism for a long, long while, for local markets, local farms, local communities, even local currencies. And I wonder if you acknowledge that there is a limit to how much can be achieved by a collection of individuals. Indeed, isn't that one of the defining problems of our time? So many of us, the very idea of the silent majority, so many of us would prefer peaceful, local, connected, less synthetic, less commodified modes of living. But those people, this great silent we, is not empowered politically other than as consumers, and it's very difficult to organise in that way, Will.
I think that most thinking citizens would realize that local, at least in terms of food production, which is what I'm really able to talk about, local is better for many, many, many reasons. Sadly, people are busy and people don't have time to focus on exactly the way the food is produced beyond the messaging that's put out by the big multinational food companies and tech companies. So I think that the thinking person that really puts the energy into it can quickly and easily realize that the industrialization, commoditization, centralization has done horrible things to our food supply. We can talk about it all day. The ability to step outside that is hard. It's if you live in a neighborhood or an urban situation, it's hard to find a place that to buy food that's raised properly that costs more. That'll cost more.
Yeah.
And especially when the messaging from the big multinational food companies is telling you that this stuff we've got on the shelf here is the best you can get. So it's very difficult. And I got to tell you that 25 years ago, when I moved from the industrial model to what I do now, at some level, I thought I was an early innovator that was going to be helping change the way we produce food. I would not have said that out loud, but at some level, I thought that. But it hadn't worked out that way. It appeared to be, but the greenwashing has become so good that we can go on and on about things that are done, but you can buy, I don't think I told you this before, but you can buy beef labeled as American grass-fed beef, and the animal was born, raised, and slaughtered in Uruguay or Australia or New Zealand. And the package plainly and legally says product of the USA. So it's so difficult for consumers to know what they're buying unless they put a lot of energy and time into it to know who the producer is. And they probably going to have to spend more money for it because they're covering the costs that otherwise are spun off to society.
We've got a fantastic question from Alpine Lake, and see if you can find that, guys, and pull it up into the screen. I want to remind our viewers and show any new viewers what happened last time Will was on our show. Now, at that time, we were talking a lot about dear Hunter Biden and of Hunter Biden's business practices, and Will was patiently waiting for the interview to begin, watching the conversation take place where Hunter defended his business practices, perhaps his place on the board of Burisma, a Ukrainian natural gas company, and the other questions that arose out of the Hunter Biden laptop story. This is how he defended himself when speaking to a mainstream legacy media journalist. Have a look at this.
I don't have to do is sit here and open my kimono as it relates to how much money I make or did or didn't. But it's like...
When we was talking about that, like at the time, we thought, open your kimono is a very evocative piece of language. I wasn't aware that Will Harris was waiting there, and look, here I am sort of discussing it.
Don't bring a kimono into it. Will, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you for having me, but full disclosure, I do not own a kimono.
Will, you're one of the few men who I would welcome the opportunity to interview in a kimono, open or closed or in any state. But I imagine that you are a person that simply sleeps naked is going to be my first guess, and that you don't have, like, maybe, I don't know what you wear in lieu of pyjamas.
Why are you getting into this?
Sorry.
I do sleep naked. I do not own pajamas or a kimono.
We can confirm that now, that Will Harris is a man who sleeps naked. Will, we're going to send you a kimono. It's something we've been planning for a long while. We're just trying to find one that's right and duly erotic. And then it's coming to you in Georgia.
Well, you said you were going to send me one last time, Russell. It never came. So your credibility is a little bit suspect here, a little bit.
Credibility with the issue. Right, let's do it now. I'll send you this bathrobe, which I love, but it's got to be silk. I'm thinking it's got to be silk, and I'm thinking it's got to be short. Will you join us to answer our final question on individual and collective, how we can drive change individually and collectively over on locals, which is our community? Would you stay with us just for a few more minutes to answer that question there for us? Thanks, Will. Cheers, man. I really appreciate that. So, to see our conversation in full, click the red Awaken button. Next week on the show, we've got independent journalist Rav Arora. He's going to be talking to us about Canada's crackdown on free speech, and Vivek Ramaswamy will be joining us. You join us too to get access to all of this fantastic content and a fantastic and ambitious community. You can see interviews in full, including Ted Waters' interview on 9/11, where we certainly went deeper than I'd intended to go. We do meditations together, readings together, as well as a somewhat bold plan to create new communities and a global revolution. So, I don't know, what do you want? Jam on it? New supporters include Firepike, thank you Firepike, Canalam, Spam, Stephen Coote, I Did, Short and Sassy too, have all become members of our community. You should become a member of our community too. This is the time to awaken. We are in the midst of a spiritual war, and only with you do we have a chance of winning. Join me next week, not for more of the same, but for more of the different. Until then, if you can, stay free.
Many switch in, switch on, switch off. Many switch in, switch on, switch off, switch on. Many switch in, switch on, switch off. Many switch in, switch on, switch off.